Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the weekly water cooler chat with Livepeer. Today we're going to be going over all things Livepeer. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up to the stage. If you're in the audience, go ahead and hit the button and put up your hand. I'll invite you up to talk. You can be anyone. It doesn't matter if you're an orchestrator, delegator, or broadcaster, or anyone just in the community that wants to jump into the conversation, ask some questions, or if you just want to hang out on stage with us, go ahead and put up your hand and I'll invite you up to the stage. Otherwise, today we're going to be talking about all things Livepeer. So we got a bit of an agenda ahead of us today. We have Yondon coming in. I invited him around 45 minutes past the hour to come up and do a Q&A about layer 2. So just because I find that that's the time where most people are involved in the chat, not everyone starts right on time. So I invited him to come in a bit later and we can talk about layer 2 specifically for the upgrade coming up. And I know a lot of orchestrators might have some questions, so we can definitely go through that, which will be very beneficial for the community as a whole and orchestrators during the upgrading process. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you're on the stage with us, go ahead and think of a question you're going to have for Yondon about layer 2. So really just anything related to tool. And then also come up with a topic that you would like to talk about during the water cooler portion that isn't necessarily about layer 2. So today we're going to have 2 topics, not just one. I know that's a lot to ask, but the layer 2 one and maybe one just for the water cooler in general. So as people come in, I'll just invite them up to stage. And like I said, put up your hand if you want to invite. Also, just as a note, the green hand means I'm inviting them up to speak. So you'll see their hands are up. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring them. It means that I've invited them and they haven't accepted. So a black hand means that they are asking to come up. So let's just jump right into introductions, just like we do with all water cooler chats. I will start with myself, and then I will go down the list that I see in front of me. So I will start. I am TitanNode. I run the TitanNode Orchestrator, which is a public pool. I've been operating since May of 2021. And I have a couple topics for today I'd like to cover. The first being is the max session limit for transcoders and the orchestrator itself. So I ran into an issue where my orchestrator has a max session limit of like 2,000, just set really high. And the idea was that people in the pool would set their max T session limit to whatever they can handle. And that hopefully when the streams hit the max T session, the orchestrator would just give away the rest of the sessions. That doesn't seem to be happening. What happens is the transcoder session limit maxes out, but the orchestrator is still trying to accept new streams, and then it crashes the entire pool and the whole thing just wipes out. So this comes back to that question of setting up the ability to set your max O session live, like in the client. So just want to talk a little bit about that. I also want to talk about strategies for attracting stake in layer 2. So strategies for improving our nodes and increasing delegation. And then I have another question about IPv6 and IPv4 for transcoders. So I will write down those as topics, but we will move on. So please introduce yourself and your topic. I'll move on to Frank. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Frank and I'm running Ultima Ratio node with Sienna since the same day as you, May last year. I have no special topics for tonight except we are very excited with what will happen tonight for us.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us. Authority Null.
Hey guys, Authority Null. Been transcoding for about 4 months now. Question is for L2, when the initial distribution of work happens, how is that going to look? Is it going to be a scramble for basically whoever is first to get online? Are they going to get the work, or I don't know what that's going to look like, so I'd be interested to know. And also another question, last week we had an issue with Infrua where it went down and a bunch of us lost all our streams. So I'm curious if in the future there's going to be some kind of failover support where we can just have a second URL there, whether it's alchemy, geth, whatever, just so we have some kind of failover just in case something goes down.
That's actually a really good point and good topic. That's a good question. I never even thought of that. So thank you for bringing that up. We'll definitely talk about that and our experiences. I'll move on to Papa Bear. Papa Bear, you want to introduce yourself on the topic?
Hi, sure. I am Papa Bear. I run Solar Farm. I started my Orchestrator in July of last year, and I had just L2 in general as a topic, but since it sounds like we're going to be covering that, I actually have something somewhat related to setting max sessions as well. In the last 0.5.28 release, they opened up a million pixels or processed metric, and that shows how many pixels have been processed. But I think it would actually be kind of cool if we could see how many pixels are being are coming from the source, and then set these sessions actually based on those two different metrics, because that is more valuable in my opinion than sessions, since all sessions aren't created equally. And that way we could really like max out our cards, or at least set where we want them to be running at as far as like a capacity, rather than just kind of a general, just 6 sessions is about this. You really get a good idea of what the throughput is. And again, depending on your cards, if you've got something that's got 2 decoders and 1 encoder, you may want to tweak for the hardware that you have. But I think that could give a lot of flexibility if we could set max sessions based on pixels processed, both decoded and encoded. So that's my topic.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm definitely curious to hear more about that. I haven't updated my nodes, so I don't know what the latest and greatest is with the update. So that'll be a good topic. Thank you so much.
I believe it's a requirement for L2. So I'm sure Jan can go into more detail about that, but I believe you need to be running that for the migration.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Cool.
You want to get on that right after the call. All right.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. Syrinx, you want to introduce yourself on the topic?
Sure. Hi. So I'm Alex. Myself and a few colleagues run Syrinx node. My first question regarding L2 is actually exactly what Authority Null brought up, which was what are the how do people think the initial distribution of work for L2 is going to go? Which I think it will be very interesting to see. And then the secondary topic is I'm curious if anyone else has messed around with dynamically adjusting the price they're quoting per pixel, say every like 2 hours, because my first very small application of my stats as a gRPC endpoint and not just through Grafana and Prometheus is dynamically adjusting what I'm actually charging to make sure that, like, let's say if like my node is entirely maxed out, then increasing the cost so that I'm making sure I'm getting the most value. And then if it's dropping, say, like below 5 streams, then reducing the price with the idea of, and of course, like the actual value being acquired, like that's somewhat relative, but I just wanted to see if adjusting this more often would do anything. So I'm curious if anyone else has looked at that or done any projections. And that's about it.
Yeah, that's a really good topic, and I think that falls right into the auto price adjust metric thing that's already implemented. So it'll be good to hear other people's opinions on what they think about that. So I definitely, good topic. I appreciate you coming. Thanks for joining us. Eliteproxy, introduce yourself on the topic.
Hey, this is John. I run the Elite Encoder node. I've been running since late October or so. I'm mostly here just to keep a pulse on the L2 migration, and I do have a few questions. One of them being like, I feel like we're pretty close to winning another ticket, but I know that the block's supposed to be locked sometime today. So I'm wondering if any work towards tickets will be moved over and kept in the snapshot, or if we're just starting over when we get to layer 2. And then also I experienced something It's similar to what you're talking about with max sessions on Orchestrator. So I'm running 2 nodes that are copies of Orchestrators and set total sessions to like 34. I had something weird happen yesterday where volume spiked to 34, but it was 34 across 2 different nodes, and it stopped right at that point. Might have just been like this random chance that it peaked right there, but it seemed like maybe it was hitting an Orchestrator limit, even though both Orchestrators weren't really hitting 34. So interested to see how if that flag is designed to work that way or if it's node dependent. But I think that's all I have for today.
Cool. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Vires, would you like to introduce yourself on a topic?
Hey all, I'm running the Syrinx 525 orchestrator since almost 3 years now. And yeah, no topic from my side.
Very good. Just listening. Thank you so much for joining us. Interpreter, would you like to introduce yourself on a topic?
Hello, I'm Peter and run Interpreter nodes. And yeah, I don't really have a topic here today, just kind of listening in as some others are. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself on a topic?
Yep. My name is Chris. I don't really have a topic, but I'm kind of just here to hang out with you guys while we nonchalantly move Livepeer protocol from layer 1 to layer 2. So nice to be with all you guys.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Chris. Alexander, would you like to introduce yourself on a topic?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Alexander Tibbetts. I'm just kind of joining to introduce myself along with you, who's also in the audience, and our team. We are building, or I'm leading go-to-market for Livepeer video services, the hosted gateway API that makes it easy for video developers to leverage the Livepeer network and get transcoding services by all of you amazing operators. Yeah, just kind of had a topic and a question to propose the group around our video dev channel and potential ways of maybe categorizing it a little bit more clearly.
Very good. Yes, we'll definitely get to that. When you mean the video dev channel, you mean, and can you just elaborate quickly on what you mean by categorize it?
Yeah, it's actually, I don't want to jump ahead here, but it just was around like how the Discord Livepeer server is organized. And,
okay.
Making some proposals on how to carve out a clear place for app developers who are looking to leverage, video services that need transcoding in a way that they know where to find their community within our awesome channels and community.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great topic. Anything to improve Discord is going to be a good topic to cover. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Alexander. We'll definitely get around to that and hopefully provide some feedback. Hunter, would you like to introduce yourself on a topic?
Yeah, sure. So I think most of you know me, but I work in product at Livepeer. I don't have any particular topics to cover today. I'll just provide some color as questions arise.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Chase. Chase is my wonderful fiance. Chase Media, would you like to introduce yourself on a topic?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Yes, it's Rebecca here with Chase Media. I've been around, I've actually just rebranded from Titan Node 2 to Chase Media, and I would love to find out a bit more about how, with the new layer 2, the selection process will go for us all getting work. So I'm really curious about if that will change and what it will be, please. And the other thing I was curious about, perhaps in the chat here, is how or are we focus on getting more broadcasters, i.e. more work for the whole system? How are we focusing potentially getting more prospects of more work in the future? And that's what I'm curious to find out. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much for being here. Wonderful, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We'll move on to Caesar. Caesar, you want to introduce yourself on a topic?
Yes, hello. I'm Caesar. I am planning on creating an orchestrator in the Livepeer network. Currently still waiting for the confluence. And I don't have any topic for today.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, we got quite a few topics to get through, and we will definitely go through them. If you are in the audience and listening, like I said, you can always join the conversation. Just put up your hand. I'll invite you up to stage, and we can talk about all things Livepeer. You can introduce yourself, or you can just hop in on the conversation. We do have another person joining us, Jason. Jason, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic? Jason, is your mic working?
Hello.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, hey. Yeah, I'm Jason, and I'm running Node for 7-8 months now. I don't have any questions today. Just wanted to listen on the upgrade if there's any update and if there's any issues or something like that. So.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us. So I've gone ahead and I posted the topics into the event chat of all of the things we can go through. What I'm going to do is, before we get into the technicals, because I know we have a lot of technical questions coming up, let's just quickly go over some overview stuff. And I want to start with Alexander and his video dev channel, just because there's a great conversation we can have around improving the community. So we're going to start the conversation today with community, general overview of Livepeer, and then the second half of this water cooler, we can get into a lot more specifics. We're going to be talking about layer 2 and more about protocol level stuff. So let's go ahead and just start with Alexander. You talked about your video dev channel, or how you can improve this. It also ties nicely into what Rebecca had said about increasing broadcasters, because I believe that's kind of your area. Can you just talk a little bit about the dev channel, what you're trying to do, a little bit about the hosted gateway API with what you work on, and just dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. One, thank you for giving me a chance to speak and for maybe even starting with this topic. Yeah, this is my first time joining the water cooler, and really eager to kind of share a little bit about what I'm up to, what my team is up to, what our goals are, and how they can serve you and everyone else a part of the Livepeer community. At the end of the day, I'm successful if we're building more demand for the Livepeer network. And one way that I can control driving that demand is via a suite of developer-friendly, easy-to-use video infrastructure and software that can have a broadcast into the Livepeer network and take off some of the heavy lifting for, say, a developer who's looking to spin up a new video consumer app and needs a set of consumable friendly APIs to do so, and doesn't want to think about the long-term strategy of building their own broadcaster application on Livepeer. So that's what we built Livepeer Video Services for. That currently lives at livepeer.com. It's existed for just about a year, and it represents the necessary infrastructure for enabling streaming apps, platforms, across all different types of use cases. In October, Livepeer, the company, acquired a company called DDV Tech. I know Yaron, one of the co-founders of that company, is a prominent water cooler attendee and contributor. I think he's not on today, probably getting some rest, because that team has, for the last weeks, especially the last few weeks, been building up towards a really huge launch that's kind of softly rolling out today, but expect more splash coming later in this week of a pretty major release for Mist Server. Mist Server is a deployable media server that complements the Livepeer video streaming stack really, really well. and is another one of the tools that we try to put into the hands of developers building apps that include video streaming or live video. So that's kind of a long kind of background. Thank you for being patient as I kind of spout out all of this context. But yeah, I was brought onto the team to help build this go-to-market effort and momentum, help to expand Livepeer's seat at the video industry table, competing for developers who are looking for solutions to build their applications with. And we know that there are developers within the Livepeer Discord community. We know that there is an audience of broadcasters, whether thinking about broadcasting, building directly on the Livepeer network, or looking for maybe step one towards building directly on the Livepeer network through Livepeer video services, feet wet with the transcoding solutions and dev tools that we have there. So that's a long way of going about tight node this question around, hey, like maybe there's some ways that we might make the Discord channels really clear on where video devs might go to get support or share some ideas, maybe about the applications they're building, or get pointed to the right piece of documentation that's hosted on livepeer.com, for whatever their needs are. This week, especially, a lot of our team is at ETH Denver, supporting hackers who are building with Livepeer tools, most notably Livepeer video service tools. And yeah, this is I have some ideas for ways that we might leverage the Discord categories in a way that might make that pathway and community a little more clear cut. But I'll take a pause there because I know I just spoke for maybe 3+ minutes straight. Any questions or feedback before I dive into that?
Yeah, I'll hop in here. Does anyone have any, like, are there any developers in chat here that have had positive experience with joining a Discord and seeing a really clear path of getting started or a nice layout in other protocols? Like, has anyone seen an example of something that has worked really well for a developer that might have joined Discord?
Really?
Because I guess I've looked at things like I'm a part of the Graph, and so I go into that Discord every once in a while, and like they seem to have a pretty good developer experience. But I'm not a developer, so I wouldn't actually know. But just from what I've seen, things look decently organized, and they have lots of resources for developers. But again, I'm not a developer, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take it, or was somebody going to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've tried to set up a broadcaster with Livepeer several months ago. It was almost a whole year, I think. It's been, and I don't think a lot of the documentation has changed, but I did struggle a little bit at first getting understanding of the docs, and the bigger part at the time for me was just that, which I think is going to be solved with layer 2, and that's the deposit requirement to get the broadcaster going. That part wasn't documented very well. So I found myself asking that question a lot. And there's a lot of great features that I think developers are looking for, like ability to save files. There's an object storage feature, but having some kind of video on demand mechanism is sort of interest, I think. Just a little bit of feedback and ideas. I mean, the livepeer.com API, I've expressed some of the, I think, opportunities with that, which would be being able to maybe host the video stream on your own site, like pipe that HLS stream somehow through your own servers instead of hosting it off your CDN. Just a few ideas.
We love those ideas. And that's really at the heart of kind of this kind of idea, or this proposal for maybe a category of channels to identify really clearly that type of feedback and capture it and get our team closer to that feedback to inform our roadmap or product or release things that people can try out in a beta. Right now, there is a channel called video-dev. and it's in the general category under the Livepeer, Discord server. And right now, that's kind of our only channel for trying to usher or encourage people who have feedback like that for improving Livepeer video service, or are building an application and need to troubleshoot something in real time to get access to our video product team. You see, if you check out that channel right now, you see a lot of Yu, who actually just joined our team last week, is our first video developer community manager, whose entire role is dedicated to helping builders take advantage of our suite of products and scale with Livepeer infrastructure and software. And here's this idea I want to share with you, which is right now, so Discord offers categories. The one category that we're all really familiar with is called General. And that's where all of our different channels are, including a channel dedicated to broadcasting for people who are thinking about broadcasting. It's also where video-dev lives. And I wanted to propose, what would y'all think if there was a new category for video services? So, in short, Livepeer videos, or short for Livepeer video services. And I moved that video-dev channel to it, maybe added another channel specific to like hackathons. Maybe the ETH Denver crew, maybe we might point them somewhere as they join the Livepeer Discord to interact with you and the rest of the community. That's my idea. I wanted to kind of get y'all's feedback on that idea, because it is a separate category. What that might mean. I wanted to do this in a way that got people's feedback before just kind of proposing and making a change. Do you think that might help in terms of pointing people to a place to engage with our team, building these products to the audiences that I'm trying to represent?
I'll quickly just step that, just hop in real quick. I not only do I like the idea, I love the idea. One thing I've noticed, just from my personal perspective, we have three channels. We have core dev, video dev, and then we have video tech, and those to me seem very similar. Obviously, video tech, I know that was kind of inspired by Papa Bear, and it's about video tech, which is great. But core dev and video dev, I personally wouldn't even know the difference between those two channels. And so if you're a broadcaster coming in, you might get caught. Like I constantly see broadcaster questions ending up in other channels just because they're maybe not sure where to go. So instead of the general tab, maybe we could have like a video, like a developer tab, I guess, for the people that you're targeting. I think that's a great idea.
And there might also,
or go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was going to say you may want to have more of a distinction between livepeer.com support and just open source development.
Yeah, we're trying to my immediate response is we're trying to wrestle with this, and how do we create appropriate segments, and given one individual may actually be represented across different segments and may be interested in all of the channels. A lot of what video services or video dev represent is there is a very vibrant video developer community of, most represented by a community run by Mux, who have a set of video services that, frankly, you might consider we kind of compete with on the Livepeer video services side. And so, this is kind of all in the spirit of, as those people who get interested in Web3 and Web3 tools that might look similar to some of the Web 2 alternatives that they're most familiar with, and they join places like the Livepeer Discord server, where should they go to engage with or learn from building tools to provide? That's kind of what I'm eager to experiment with, to find something that works. And if the group here kind of likes this at least experimental trial of maybe a separate category, and we can mess with the naming of it and the channels that go there as we go, then yeah, maybe I'll take some next steps and share in the general chat room what we end up doing. And of course, we can always adjust if it doesn't feel right or if it adds more confusion. Hopefully, it only increases focus.
Yeah, like if you want to create consistency, one way of doing it is maybe following the Livepeer docs as they stand right now, right? There's two sides of the spectrum, right? There's two tabs really. There's video miners and video developers, right? So it would make sense, and that's very clear. I remember when I first joined Livepeer, when I looked at the docs, I went, "Oh, video miner, like that's me. That's what I want to do, right?" So it was very clear as to what tab to click to get started. So maybe that ease of categories could also be implemented into Discord, where you have, instead of general, you could almost call it video miner, and that's the video miner tab, and then the next one is video developer, and under that is all video developer stuff, right? Kind of the two different stakeholders, right? And then you could even have like delegators, but that falls under video mining. So but I think that's a good idea. I think we need to empower, like we also have a channel called Broadcasting, which falls into video dev, maybe core dev. Well, I know they're all different, but from my perspective, they all seem to merge together. Yeah. Does anyone else have any comments on that? I guess the real question is, do we have anyone else have any suggestions on how we can improve the dev experience for broadcasters? Okay, great. Well, Alexander, do you have any last comments before we move on to the next topic?
Other than just thank you for having me and letting me share some of this feedback and being so receptive. I can follow up in the general chat room as we take some next steps, and looking forward to future feedback from here.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. We'll go on to a couple more topics here. The next we'll go into, let's see if we had any more other top level stuff that's not specific. We'll just jump right into Syrinx's question about dynamic price adjustment per pixel. Because now we're going to start getting a little more technical, and I believe Yondin should be joining us shortly. But before we get into that, like Syrinx, do you want to talk a little bit about your idea you have, and maybe we can provide some feedback? Oh, is Syrinx not with us? Oh, I think he left. I quickly wanted to comment on that because I believe he was trying to create a system that changed the price per pixel based on how many streams he got. That's interesting. I think Livepeer already does that based on gas price, which you can turn off so it stays static. But just also keep in mind that the selection process, you don't get more or less work necessarily because of gas price or your price per pixel. You only get work based on you being below a certain threshold, right? So if a broadcaster is willing to pay 1,000 Wei per pixel, and if you're above that, you're not going to get any of that work. And if you're below that, it doesn't matter how much you're below that, you're still going to get the same amount of work. So adjusting the price per pixel based on the streams you're getting might be beneficial in the future when there's lots of broadcasters. But in the short term, like Livepeer.com is our largest broadcaster, and I believe they pay 1,200 Wei. So anything below 1,200 Wei is really no point of adjusting your price too much, unless someone else can comment on that.
The only use case I've seen for that is I've adjusted it a little bit as Ethereum has gone way up and way down, like from 7,000 and going to 3,000. Like I adjusted it up a few hundred, but I think it's a good idea to keep it under 1,200, like you said.
Especially in the short term, as their largest broadcaster is Livepeer.com. So, yeah, dynamically adjusting the price might be good in the future, but for now, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on that. Cool. Okay. Yeah, he's gone. So if he elaborated, we might be able to help him. Okay, great. Let's go into Authority Null. Can you just tell us a little bit about your Infrua problem and what you propose for a failover solution?
Yeah, sure. So last week, Infura had some issues, and some of us kind of paid the price on that. So it was actually Nightnode who wrote up a ticket on GitHub for this. So it is there if anyone wants to check it out. And the idea would be to just be able to add a failover ETH URL to the config, just so that if something happens, it can switch over to whatever you're using as a backup.
I guess my question with that is why not just handle that like in your operational setup? Just like if you detect that Infrua goes down, spin up with a new ETH URL.
Well, I mean,
Well,
if I can comment on that,
yeah.
right now there's no, like, I mean, and I was talking about this the other day, is right now there's no like high availability option for Livepeer, right? Like everything requires you to disrupt the operation, bump you down to the bottom of the selection process, and then you have to build yourself back up, right? Like if you implemented something where if there's you know, some error coming out of your primary and you immediately hop back over to your secondary, then you're not taking yourself down. You might lose some streams in the interim, but you're going to be able to pick back up without having this downtime.
Yeah, so there's actually a ticket about this for a zero downtime deployment. It's been blocked pending some other technical work that has to be done, but it's basically setting it up so it's easy to do like a blue-green deployment. And I'm wondering if that would address the real issue here, which is that you can't really update your config without going down and therefore being penalized.
It would, but it also wouldn't. I think the idea is like having automation and redundancy. So you'd still want to be able to put something like that in the config so that you could do it remotely without having to actually manually do anything.
I guess my point though is that that's the sort of thing that you theoretically can monitor within your own operational setup. I'm not convinced that sort of, it just seems like a rabbit hole, right? Like if you have one failover and then what happens if that like if that one goes down?
Well, two is better than one, and a lot of us aren't doing this as a full-time gig. We're not, at our servers 100% of the time. So having that automation is really important.
I mean, like some things we can control, right? Like for example, if you were to like some of us are doing load balancing with Route 53, we can totally control that, right? Like I can set up where if I'm getting health checks and my health checks go down for my New Jersey 1 node, then I can fail over to my New Jersey 2 node. That's something I can control, right? But if say at 2 o'clock in the morning, Infura goes down, or I'm running a Gethlight node and that goes down, but my backup is Alchemy or something like that. If I don't have a way to fail over to that, and maybe there is a way to, but I don't think there is a way to do that without me taking down my node and making that manual change myself. I'm down until I decide to wake up, right? So
But that's the problem that the zero downtime deployment would fix, right? Like it seems like there are two separate questions here.
I mean, I would need to look into what they're proposing into that, but like do you have a link for that so I can read into that more before I comment further?
Yeah, let me find the ticket.
Thank you.
I mean, like I get that there would be like it's not a trivial lift to implement that sort of monitoring.
Thank you, Windex. Windex posted it.
Can this be so this I'm just seeing two issues here that this is maybe addressing, which is so updating a node dynamically while it's live, which might also fix the max O session limit increase and decrease. But so that would, I just wanted to comment on that because that is a topic otherwise. So would being able to adjust a node, so not only does it fail over your ETH URL, but also update your O session limits, would that also if we made it dynamically upgradable, would it fix all those problems, or is that opening up a can of worms?
It would be basically anything in the config, as far as I understand it.
Interesting. Would there?
You still have to be present to do that, though. I mean,
Right,
as opposed to like, I mean,
that's my
if you're
thing.
like, you know, if something went down, like I'm speaking, you know, specifically about like your ETH provider, and it just rolled over to the next one. I mean, you don't have to be like, you don't actually have to catch that happening. I mean, it would just do that automatically.
I guess my point though is that like you can have a service running locally on whatever machine you're running your O that like periodically pings Infrua and is like, hey, is that all good here? Just like does a health check. Then if the health check starts failing, then it updates the config file.
Yeah, sorry, no, I didn't mean to cut you off. So if I'm thinking what you're talking about, it would be similar to setting up like almost like a Route 53 health check and using that as a URL, and that way it should like basically putting Infura or Geth or Alchemy both behind a Route 53 health check.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
something like that.
That could be, I mean, sure, yeah, that could be the immediate term thing, but yeah.
I'm totally in agreement that the zero downtime config thing or deployment needs to be updated, because that's a pretty clear blocker for any of this stuff. But there's always sort of this question about like what should be built into the core software and what should not. And to me, this reads as something that like you know there are advantages to running a technically competent and technically complex setup, and I think this is one of them.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think that's I'll look into the Route 53 failover and see if that's, because there is a failover option in there. So
yeah, let me know. Like, if that's not workable, like I'm totally open to changing my position on this. But if it is workable, I think that could be a great solution.
I just feel like basic redundancy a basic redundancy should be built into the software for the sake of broadcasters and streams going down and the quality of the network. It just seems like something that should be part of it and not something you have to do a roundabout thing to get to work.
Well, there is redundancy, but it's on the broadcaster side. Like if your stream goes down, if your goes down because Infura is failing, then that stream's going to switch over to someone who's using Alchemy, which isn't failing.
Right, but isn't that quite isn't that noticeable when a stream switches? Isn't there a little bit of lag or some kind of disruption, like just a little bit? If that can be negated, wouldn't that be preferable?
Yeah, but then in the longer term, the system will learn to prefer broadcasters that are using reliable architecture.
I guess the question is like if an O does go offline, does the viewer that's viewing content from the broadcaster, do they detect any glitch? Has anything gone wrong for them, or has the broadcaster just failed over gracefully and continues to serve fully transcoded content, and the viewer doesn't actually notice it? I mean, how good is the failover in the broadcaster, I guess is my question.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I would assume that there is some buffering. I don't know how extensive that is. I saw Yana just jumped on the call. Do you have any insight on that?
I mean, there's some buffering from the viewer's point of view. They've got like 10, 15 seconds buffered up. But yeah, I'd be interested in Yana's view on it as well.
Just so I understand correctly, yeah, so this is about, at the moment, how good is the broadcaster at switching in the event that a single orchestrator returns an error. So I think it's pretty good at switching for most types of errors. The types of errors that it likely has more trouble, and what I mean by pretty good at switching is that there should be no noticeable impact from the viewer's point of view, where it just happens to be the case that the previous segment was transcoded by one orchestrator and the next segment is transcoded by a different orchestrator. So I think for most classes of errors, the broadcaster does a pretty good job from recovering from those scenarios. With that being said, I think there's still a class of errors such as like hanging network requests that the broadcaster doesn't. I don't think the broadcaster recovers as well from right now, where it will switch, but there will be an additional delay from the switch. And in those scenarios, it depends how much video the video player that the user is using has already buffered, but it could result in some additional buffering on the player side. But that's something that the broadcaster can improve its behavior around. And just more engineering work needs to be spent there. So I don't know if that helps add some color.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Appreciate it.
I'll just hop back in because I'll
thank
unless
you.
you want to finish your question there, Chris. But just
no, I just wanted.
Great. I just wanted to wrap back around to the actual initial topic because we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole. But I guess the original question was just about the ability to update an O live while it's running. Do we have any last comments on that before we move on to the topic of introducing Yondon and going into L2? Okay, I think we pretty much well covered that. I would love to see Nightnode or Authority, if you guys want to set up some sort of DNS failover through Route 53 and see if you can do that in as a quick and dirty way of doing it from our side. I would be curious. I'll try it as well, just because if that can help the redundancy of orchestrators in general, that would be really helpful. It's a good idea. Okay, cool. Let's just hop right into a bit of Q&A for Yondon. Yondon, just before we get started, we do have a number of questions here about L2, and a lot of orchestrators are on this call. Just as a reminder, this call is being recorded, and we'll be able to view it later. And if you're in the audience and want to ask some questions or jump into the conversation, please just raise your hand and I'll invite you up to the stage. So Yondon, just before we get started, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and just a quick update on the layer 2 before we get into the Q&A?
Sure. So my name is Yondon, and I've been leading the engineering and research effort around the L2 migration to Arbitrum for the Livepeer protocol. And in terms of the status, I can't remember the exact block number, but so we, in the LIP 73 vote that finished up last week, there was a block number specified in that proposal. I think it's like 14 million something. Yeah, 14 million something. And that's currently set. That block is set to be mined in like 2 hours or so, a little less than 2 hours. So because that vote passed last week, various core team engineers have been working on preparing for this upgrade, where what we can expect to happen is that after that block, so a little less than 2 hours from now, the L1 protocol transactions are going to be disabled. So the current set of smart contracts on layer 1 Ethereum that everyone has been interacting with through the Explorer as well as their node are going to be disabled. And pretty shortly afterwards, migrations to L2 are going to be enabled. So the way that all of this is going to work under the hood is that there are a set of additional smart contracts that have been deployed. So the protocol smart contracts have been deployed on layer 2 on Arbitrum. So those are live. And the bridge contracts, so the set of smart contracts that actually help facilitate moving from layer 1 to layer 2, have been deployed as well. So what will happen in a little less than 2 hours, once that designated block number is mined, is that in addition to the L1 protocol transactions being disabled, those bridge contracts will enable support for actually orchestrators to migrate over to L2. And then from that point forward, they would be staked and they would be registered as orchestrators in the L2 protocol contracts. So at a very high level, That's what we're working towards and what we can expect to kind of kick off the process around in a little less than 2 hours. And as I hope a lot of people saw at the end of last week, there was also a new Go Livepeer release that was published, and that's the first version of Go Livepeer, so the Livepeer node that is able to connect to these new layer 2 protocol contracts on Arbitrum. So everyone that is migrating should make sure to be running that latest version, so 0.5.28, so that once they complete the migration workflow via the Explorer in the migration tool, they can restart their node and use the network Arbitrum 1 mainnet flag to make sure that they can connect to those new contracts on layer 2. So those are some of the things that we've been working towards. Yeah, and happy to answer any questions or address any points of confusion that may be there.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Yondan. We appreciate it. We did get a list of questions at the beginning of this call, so I'll introduce who asked them, and they can further their question. And then after we go through my list, if there's any more questions, we can wrap that up. So the first one, we'll just quickly start with Eliteproxy. Elite, you talked about winning another ticket now versus into layer 2, before and after the snapshot. Can you just elaborate on that and ask your question?
Yeah, just a small question. Like, I guess we get a winning ticket every 10 to 30 days or so, and I feel like we're pretty close to the next day or so to getting one. So since the snapshot, I guess, is going to be taken here shortly, let's say we don't win a ticket in the next 2 hours. Is all of that work that's already been done, is sort of tickets that we've earned, or is that going to be copied over to L2, or do we kind of start on a clean slate when we get there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I wouldn't think of it as like the tickets that you've received up until this point. I wouldn't think of it as like they don't matter, because so you've been receiving a bunch of tickets in the past period of time, and you haven't received a winning one yet. And once the protocol transactions on L1 are disabled and you move to L2, you would have stopped receiving work on L1, and then you would presumably start to receive work on L2, and you'll just continue receiving tickets. And so the situation would be similar to if you didn't move to L2 at all, where you would just continue receiving tickets, except now you're receiving them on L2 instead of L1. It's not like there's some tracker that says you received this amount of tickets on L1 and then you reset your count on L2. I think it's better thought of as there is continuity. You're receiving tickets on L1, and now you continue to receive tickets just on L2.
That makes sense. Yeah, that answers it. Thank you.
Related to that, just one thing that to be aware of is that I think most orchestrators on this call who have received winning tickets have been pretty accustomed to whenever they redeem a winning ticket, there is a face value of a certain value. I think it's just been around like 0.18 ETH for the longest time. I think we should expect to see that face value look slightly different on L2 when the first winning tickets are redeemed there, mainly because the face value of winning tickets, an input into the calculation for what the face value should be right now, is how much it is expected to cost to redeem that ticket. And because the transaction costs on layer 1 are pretty high, that definitely pushes the face value of winning tickets higher. But because the transaction cost for redeeming a ticket should be lower on L2, I think we should see slightly lower face values when people start receiving winning tickets.
Is that face value controlled by Livepeer, or is that something that we're setting ourselves? Like who's making that judgment on that?
At the moment, it's the node, so it's programmatic, and the rough algorithm that the orchestrator node uses to determine how to set the face value. There's a few other inputs here, but at a high level, it first tries to estimate, okay, how much do I think it's going to cost to redeem a ticket. And then in an ideal scenario, it will try to multiply that by 100 so that the face value is 100x what the transaction cost is, which would mean that the quote unquote overhead is around like 1%. So that like your transaction cost is 1% of the cumulative value that you have. There's a few circumstances where that's not going to be the case, and this has to do with the probabilistic micropayment protocol and like broadcaster reserves, which I can get into separately if people want to. But yeah, that should give you a sense of how the orchestrator like programmatically does this, at least right now.
So, you're saying right now? So is that something that you're planning on changing, or like that we would have to then, set ourselves, and then that way people can be redeeming whatever value they want, or is there like on layer 2 we should just expect it to change on its own?
So I say for now mainly because that initial implementation was the reason that we made it to be automatic in the first place, or in this implementation, was it wasn't clear like how someone should reason about setting these values. So the thought process was, well, okay, this seems reasonable. You target a particular overhead, and let's start with this. And it hasn't been updated in a while, but there might be a scenario where maybe there's like a better algorithm to use there that is better for the orchestrator, or maybe there is a scenario where orchestrators would want to configure the values themselves somehow. Definitely welcome feedback on that. To be honest, it's not an area that I don't know if anyone else has put that much thought into it as of late, but I just say for now because who knows? I could see arguments being made one way or another.
Because like, I mean, if you think about it, like right now, it's not like a 1%. I mean, and you said that it's not a 1% overhead, right? Like to redeem an $800 ticket back when it was like $4,000 was like $300 to redeem $800. So it is almost 40% or so of that total ticket value. If it does it automatically and it keeps it to a 1% level, then that's totally understandable. But then it's like, also there might be people who want to redeem every $500 and then turn that down to like a 0.2%, overhead, which is up for debate, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And I think you highlight some of like the edge cases that it doesn't really handle particularly well right now, and would definitely be looking to kind of improve on those and get to a more desirable behavior for people after the migration.
Yep. If you guys, I mean, I don't know what the lift on changing all that programming is, but I think like the one thing that most people here like is just the option, right? Like if you're going to do an automatic adjustment, and if it's not too much of a lift, then implement you can also set it yourself. I think you guys have expected ticket EV in there, but I don't know. I think Papa Bear did some testing on it, and all it does is just change probability, and then you get like more or less tickets. So it's basically a balance itself out. You don't actually get any more value, or like you don't redeem earlier or later. But like to modify something like that, where you can then say, well, I don't want it to be automatic. I just want it every $100. That's when I want it, or something like that. So that way you have the option in there. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way or not, but
Cool. All right. Yeah. I mean, that's. I'm pretty excited that hopefully that the update will cause tickets to be a little more frequent, and obviously gas prices to be more manageable. So I think as we go on, there'll be updates and lots of feedback from the community, which can improve on all this stuff. Any last questions on the ticket redemption on layer 2 before we move on to the next topic? Cool. Okay, let's move on to just sticking with layer 2. Authority had a question about the initial distribution of work. Authority, do you want to talk about what your question was?
Sure. Yeah, I think we're all pretty curious of how the initial day or two is going to look. Is it going to be some kind of chaotic scramble for O's to get online first so they can receive the work, or is something else the case there?
Yeah, so immediately after the migration, so a lot of this work on the network comes from the Livepeer Inc. broadcasters powering Livepeer.com, and those broadcasters pretty immediately after the migration are going to be switching over to Arbitrum, to layer 2. So what would happen is that the orchestrators that are available on, because this is like a clean switch and we're not supporting like hybrid payments on like one layer and the other, because it's a clean switch from L1 to L2. That's why the broadcasters are moving over to L2 pretty immediately after the upgrade. And that will mean that the orchestrators that have migrated are the ones that would be eligible for work. So if there are relatively few orchestrators that have migrated, that means there will be a smaller orchestrator set for work to be distributed around. If there's a larger number of orchestrators, then there's a larger set of orchestrators for work to be distributed around. In terms of the actual like selection implementation, there is nothing that's being changed right now. As I mentioned in my forum post over the weekend, we are planning on digging into this area after we have some resources free up after the upgrade, but nothing is changing immediately. So I think that's the only thing that I think people should keep in mind, that the orchestrators that, because no one will receive work on L1 after the upgrade, the orchestrators that are on L2 will be the ones receiving work.
And I'm sorry, you probably already said this. When is the actual, like, it's going to drop to 0 for everybody on L1? Like,
it is, so that will happen in, like, I want to say like in the couple minutes after that block that I mentioned is mine, so in a little less than 2 hours.
Okay, cool.
Oh, the timing of this is just impeccable. I didn't even plan it.
I know, right? And is there going to be any recent? Are we looking for like at a new revision to be popped out anytime soon, as far as like for the client, or this is the working client for layer 2?
The node software?
Yeah, like is there, should we be expecting anything in the next few days, or is this like your running revision?
Yeah, I don't know about the next few days, barring like there are bugs that need to be fixed. So of course, if there are bugs, then we'll try to cut releases as fast as we can. But barring that scenario, I wouldn't expect a release in the next couple of days, but over the course of the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll definitely be working on some additional improvements as follow-ons.
Okay. Yeah.
Do transcoder nodes have to upgrade as well? Like the orchestrator node can upgrade, but can the transcoders nodes lag behind since they're only doing the transcoding, or do they have to upgrade as well?
They should. I don't think that there have been. Yeah, so there haven't been any like network protocol changes between the orchestrator and transcoder that I'm aware of, so they should be fine.
Because
I think
Nico, Livepool, and myself will have that problem of updating all our transcoders. So there'll be a bit of a delay there because I have to push out an update to them. But yeah, if there doesn't need to be an update immediately, then I can wait a couple days.
Yeah, I don't believe there needs to be an immediate update.
I've got 2 questions. Are there any, this might be a little late, I haven't been keeping up with how to use bridges and such, so is there any like instructions on how to move the stake over? Is that all that we need to do in addition to the software upgrade? And then is there any effort to get like the open source broadcasters other than Livepeer? Like, are they being notified, and is there a good announcement communication around that so that like somebody running an open broadcaster doesn't go down and realize it? Sorry, it's like 3 questions.
In terms of the migration, and there's documentation around that, I can share it in a little bit.
That would be super
It's essentially
helpful.
the same. Yeah, for sure. It's the same doc that we shared for testnet, just pointing at mainnet instead. So it'll be a really similar process. I guess that answers it for orchestrators. If you happen to have like liquid LPT on L1 that's not delegated, you'll need to use the Arbitrum bridge. There's a guide forthcoming for that as well.
Got it. Okay. So then, so there's not really a waiting period on just moving stake that's already staked. It's pretty instant.
For orchestrators, yes. For delegators, there's a lag to allow time to verify the snapshot.
What you should do is move some ETH over to your orchestrator address on Arbitrum, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to pay for claiming the reward and also redeeming tickets.
That's a great point, Vires.
That is a great point, Vires.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
I did that this morning, so I'm on Vires' page. I have a question. Is there any estimates on what the gas costs will be for transactions on L2? Just kind of a general thing for like, well, I guess in general, are there any kind of estimates?
L2,
Is the limits the same?
L2 fees.info.
Yeah, or you could use coin tool.
Oh, I meant specific to Livepeer for like doing transactions on Livepeer, like what, like a reward call, like how much ETH that will, or like how much gas will use.
Yondon, is that just going to be the same gas limit and then just adjust the GUI, or?
Yeah, so it's a little it's slightly more complicated than that, just because on Arbitrum, gas is measured differently than on layer 1 Ethereum. So a unit of gas on Ethereum is not a unit of gas on Arbitrum. So unfortunately, it's not a apples to apples translation. In the past, so earlier on, we did some benchmarking just to get a rough sense of the cost reduction we could expect by submitting some of these transactions on Arbitrum as opposed to on Ethereum. And these were estimates. So the way that we did this was we deployed the contracts on Arbitrum testnet in order to get a sense of what the gas usage would look like. And then we took a look at like the average gas price on Arbitrum mainnet at the time, which I think hovered around like the 1 GWA range. And I think when we compared that, so we took that estimate of the gas price, multiplied it by the actual gas usage on testnet on Arbitrum. And I think for most transactions at the time, we saw kind of at least a 10 to 15x reduction in cost, and some were higher. There was some variance there. So that was the last benchmarking that we did. And I am wary of kind of conveying any larger reductions in that, even though we did see some of that, just because it'll be dependent on the activity of Arbitrum at that time. So we'll very quickly see. I think we should expect to see that type of reduction, but in terms of kind of greater reductions than that, we'll see soon.
Thank you.
Okay. We got a couple more questions. I'm just going to hop in with one for myself. The Arbitrum URL for the node. Is that something we can get from Infrua, or is there a more recommended place? Where can we get that the most easily?
So there are a few ways to get that. So you can use Infrua, and there is also a public RPC endpoint that's provided by the Off-Chain Labs team. So those are all candidates. One thing that I would note that has been highlighted already is that if you're using a service like Infrua or Alchemy, they price things differently, but they both have pricing tiers based on the amount of request activity that there is. And at the moment, because there's just so many more blocks on Arbitrum, there's a lot more requests that the node is sending out right now. So that should be factored in when people, so people should be monitoring their request usage when they use something like Infrua or Alchemy. We'd like to make improvements to the node to make requests to the ETH provider less onerous. But for now, I would just recommend monitoring request usage if you're using a priced provider like Infrua or Alchemy. And then the Off-Chain Labs RPC endpoint, that one's free, although I'm not sure what guarantees the Off-Chain Labs team can provide for that RPC endpoint, because they're more so providing it out of like convenience. So I'm not really sure what the quality of that service is going to be like.
I would also add that you can, of course, run your own node, but if you want to do that, you probably should start syncing like yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a rough idea of how many like times how many times more requests will be made? Just so we can get an idea of like, are we going to go way over if we're using Alchemy or something?
We have not. I don't have numbers on that right now, but it's something that we'll try looking into.
So
I guess we'll find out real soon, I guess. Okay.
Just on the RPC node, I've just noticed that if you're using Infrua, you can't use Arbitrum on the free tier. You need to be a paid tier to use the Arbitrum on Infrua.
You can use it on Alchemy, just for anyone that wants to give that a try.
I have I mean, this is just testnet for Arbitrum, but Arbitrum testnet is 252,000, or about 253,000 in the last 24 hours, whereas layer 1 is 50,000 for the last 24 hours request. So that's a lot. Like 5x.
And does the testnet Yondon run the same? The blocks are the same length in the Arbitrum test versus like the Arbitrum live or mainnet?
I'm actually not sure how it compares, because what's different on Arbitrum versus like a layer 1 like Ethereum is that there isn't like a fixed rough block time. So they're not. Sometimes there can be like bursts of a bunch of blocks, and then sometimes it can slow down. So it's hard to say right now.
Got it. I should probably get an off-chains, off labs one. Get rid of my Arbitrum. I'm sorry, my Alchemy.
In the essence of time, Yondon, how much time do you have left? Like, I know I invited you for 15 minutes, maybe it's almost been 30 minutes. How much time do you have left, maybe, to answer? We've gone through most of the questions, but I'll probably open it up now. But how much time do you have?
I could probably take one more question, and then I'll hop to prepare for the upgrade.
Okay, great. There was, in that case, there's one person that I didn't get to that had a question about the 0.28 release that just came out, and that was Papa Bear. Papa Bear, you talked about the million pixel process metric, and you had a question about that. Can you elaborate on what you?
I mean, I don't think we don't need to like take up Yondon's time for that. It's not an L2 specific question. I mean, that's something that maybe I can write up later and even just kind of gauge what the orchestrators, if they think that that's worthwhile. But or I could bring it up if there's no one else has a question about L2 and Jan's got a minute.
Sure. Let's just stick to L2. Any last questions on L2?
Is there an LP for LPT on Arbitrum?
Sorry, what was that? Is there a what for LPT?
Yeah, is there any way to buy LPT?
I guess a liquidity pool.
Yes. Sorry.
Last I checked, there was not well, actually, yeah, there actually, no, definitively there isn't, at least in DEXs, there is no liquidity pool yet, just because there hasn't been like that counterpart to, there hasn't been the L2 version of LPT deployed up until like 2 days ago. So that's something that we would hope to grow in that area once we complete the upgrade, because not only will people be able to migrate their stake, but they'll be able to move over any LBT from L1 as well. So I think there'll be a lot of opportunities to create liquidity pools once all of this is enabled, but nothing there at the moment.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have one quick question. Will there be a post on Discord somewhere once the broadcasters have made the switch over?
Yes, we will do that.
Awesome.
I also have a question about the rounds on Arbitrum. So right now it's 760 blocks or so. I'm assuming that will change, right, on Arbitrum?
So the rounds on Arbitrum are also going to be, so the quirk here is that the rounds on Arbitrum are still going to be defined in terms of the number of L1 blocks. So the quirk with Arbitrum is that like smart contracts deployed on Arbitrum, when you do anything related to block numbers, the block numbers are actually the layer 1 block numbers and not the layer 2 block numbers. And one of the main reasons for this is actually related to the point I made earlier, where Arbitrum doesn't have like a steady state of blocks like every like 12, 13 seconds or whatnot. They come in bursts. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. So kind of a better, kind of more reliable clock, if you will, is still like layer 1 blocks. So rounds on Arbitrum will still be denominated in layer 1 blocks. So it'll still be whatever it is right now, I think 5,700 layer 1 blocks. So it should still be roughly this, each round should still be roughly the same amount of time as a round on L1. And I say roughly just because there's some details around how soon a smart contract on Arbitrum is made aware of new block on layer 1. But roughly speaking, rounds should still be about the same length as they are today.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, there we go. I just want to thank Yondon. We'll wrap up this Q&A. Thank you so much for Yondon for coming and joining us and answering a lot of questions about Layer 2. It's really, really helpful and timely because it's happening so soon, and we have lots of orchestrators in here eager for the upgrade. So thank you so much for your time and joining us during the water cooler chat.
All right, thank all of you, and we'll see you guys online.
Cool.
Thanks, Yondon.
Thank you. Okay, we shall continue on with the rest of the water cooler, which there are still more topics, and then we'll wrap it up for this week. So before we move on, I just want to talk quickly about some strategies for attracting stake onto L2. And then we can go into Papa Bear's question, and there's still some other stuff to go through. So pretty exciting stuff. Does anyone actually, before we go on, does anyone have any comments about their timing on when they plan on upgrading? Is everyone going to upgrade in the next hour or two, or are people going to wait, or what's the general consensus?
I think I've already upgraded the software. But yeah, me too. I'm straight on that. I've already upgraded the software.
Sadly, I hit 0 sessions.
I was like ready. I'm like ready to go as soon as it happens, unless there's a reason not to. Did I miss something that would make it where you don't want to do that?
I guess no. I just I don't know if people are going to bed or waking up. I don't know what people's time zones, whether they're eager. I don't know. I just wanted to get just an idea of how.
I mean, I'll tell you what. I'll go first, and then like give it about 24 hours, and you guys can join right after.
Yeah, I was like, I want to be the first one on there and see what happens. If L1's shut down, then might as well be on L2, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason not to.
Okay, cool. I'm planning on doing a little tutorial, a video tutorial on how to do it using a test node, and then I'll move my main node over later. So if anyone has any, obviously just
Mr. Mainnet is going to do a test node video. Wow, we got to write that one down.
No. The node is still on mainnet.
Testing in prod.
Okay, I missed something there.
It's just a secondary node I have on mainnet. It's just It's just two. It's
Oh,
just
your test. Okay, gotcha. Your test
I'm
node,
doing
not
my test node on mainnet. I'm still Mr.
Okay.
Mainnet.
Oh,
All right.
okay. I think things are still normal. Okay. I got nervous for a minute.
Hey, sorry to bring this. I have a. So I was looking into the Route 53 thing. So with like health checks, you're basically just saying like, hey, can we ping this address and it's live, right? But the thing is, when Infrua went down, it wasn't that the website went down, so a health check on that would still have shown that it's live, right? Hunter, do you know what's the type of traffic that is being sent from like for these check-ins? If it's TCP, which is an option for health checks with Alchemy and Infura, or with Route 53, then you'd, I guess, maybe be able to find a way to do a TCP health check against Infura and Alchemy, and then you might be able to determine whether or not something's down. But if not, then there's no way to know. Like, you wouldn't be able to rely on a separate service for health checks to automate failover and do failover DNS.
I'm not super familiar with what Infura and Alchemy use. I'm sure they have that documented somewhere.
Yeah. Or like even like how like what the traffic that Livepeer is using to, I guess, use that stuff that's coming in. Like, I don't know how to better describe this. Like, the ETH URL is utilizing what type of traffic is what I'm trying to say.
I'm pretty sure it's HTTP.
I feel like the health check would have to be a block pulling request or something. Not just
They may also have a. Go ahead, Titan.
Oh, not just a ping, but like some sort of block pull. Go ahead.
They may have their own like health check endpoint too.
You not just check the logs on your local system. If you're using Journal CTL, normally when Infura goes down, I see errors in the log.
Yeah, but that's not the point. I mean, any of us can do that, sure. But if it's 2:00 in the morning and it goes down like Infura did for some people, then you're down until either they fix it or you wake up. But if you can,
you could run a cron job to check the logs, and if you see the error, then you could restart your node and point it at Alchemy, for instance.
is that something? Is that something that you would know? I mean, hey, I'm all for promotion.
Well, you
make that?
You could have, if you're using, I'm assuming most of us are using config files now, so you could have two config files, one pointing at Infura, one pointing at Alchemy, and then you just stop and start your service with a script and change the config file over.
Or if you're running DNS, some sort of DNS, you could just repoint the DNS to the other endpoint, so you don't have to restart your node.
Yeah,
that would work.
But that's the thing, is that DNS would need to know how to identify an outage that's not directly related to like a website. Like, if you could, I mean, I don't know. Actually, you know what? So the URL that you get for your website, if there's like right now, like if you were to go and look at mine, it just shows like a whole bunch of like basically like an API array of information. So if someone, I don't know, you'd have to basically view what it looks like when it goes down, like when that API went down, like what was it actually putting out, and then if it's putting out nothing and it just fails out, then sure, health check works. If not, then basically it'll just keep saying it's live, and then the DNS doesn't work. Like the DNS failover won't work. So
again,
that's the only thing I was just looking at. But
I think the logging is probably one of the best ways to check for that. Yeah. I actually do have a cron job task running on my Linux node. I have one Linux, one Windows. So you could probably, if you have it on Windows as a service, I think there's a way to check that. But I mean, on the cron job, I'd gone as far as writing a script that would send me an email if certain things were seen in the logs. But I did that through a network of my own resources with PHP scripts and stuff. But I'm sure there's ways to do it natively on Linux or Windows.
I know that with the Ethereum, well, with Geth at least, there is a health check endpoint now that you can use. So if you're running it locally, then you can at least know if your local one's down. What we used to do at my company is we used to check the block number and see if the block number would return what we expected versus all of our other like 4 nodes that we were running.
Hey, just something, like Yondon isn't here, but so I raised something similar about like ability to fail over to a different ETH URL. I raised it like 7-8 months ago. Yondon came back with a suggestion of being able to run some sort of high availability Ethereum node cluster. Anyway, there's some comment in there. I never got around to trying it, but like maybe it's something that's designed to give the Livepeer process some sort of redundancy between ETH URLs. That's
Yeah, I guess that would solve the problem. If this has come up 8 months ago, then obviously it's been thought about a little bit at least.
Could you post the link for that in the chat, please?
yeah. I've just shared it in event chat. The issue
cool.
from July last year, and Yondon gave what I thought was a pretty good kind of response to it as a suggestion for how to deal with my requirement.
Great. I think we should continue that conversation in that thread, and then maybe we can spring that to life and get some solutions going.
Definitely.
Cool. Okay. Let's continue on. We got about 30 minutes left. I'm just going down my list of topics. Let's see. What have we covered? We covered most things. Papa Bear, did you want to talk about your million pixel process metric and just elaborate on it? Because personally, I'm just really curious about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a thought that kind of came to me this morning because I've only been playing with it for like a couple days, but I just thought it would be an interesting way to set max instead of sessions, just like your max amount of work that you can accept based on the pixels being processed, because that really tells what the throughput is. Because I mean, sessions, as we all know, aren't created equally. So setting your sessions to, let's just say roughly, like just picking 20 as an example, sometimes that can max your card out, and other times you're running at like half capacity. So but when you're talking about the actual pixels that are being processed and running through the card, it really gives you tells you really where you are, where you stand as far as what your cards can handle. So
right,
I just thought it would be.
There's a big difference between like 30 concurrent streams at 720p or 30 concurrent streams at 144p, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's a really nice thing to explore.
The other thing that just came.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say what I also noticed
No,
was the new metric that was added. That's the pixels processed. So that's really what your encoded streams are, or that is what your encoded streams are.
Right.
But for most people, I think the limit is on. So we would need a new metric for this. Is the source pixels that are coming in, because usually it's the decoder that maxes out, or at least for me, is usually my decode that's maxing out. So I actually think it would be really interesting if there was a way to do it like where it's both. If either one of, like, you set your, like, okay, here, like, what basically you need a new benchmark. So your benchmark, instead of saying it can do this many sessions, it would say it can do this many pixels per second or minute or whatever the metric is that we decide. So you would have basically, if because if people are sending 720 to be at process versus 1080p, it's going to make a big difference too. So I just think it would be interesting for me, it seems like it would make more sense that you get the most out of your card if you're basing it on what the actual throughput is, rather than just kind of like this is an estimate of what your card can do based on the sessions when the sessions aren't all, again, created equally. So that was kind of, I don't know if that, did that make sense to anyone?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I don't know if it makes sense to me because I've been using it, but like, when I sit there and I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's really, it can handle a lot more than, I'm set at, or like, oh, wow, this is, there was a point this morning where I had 3 sessions on 2 different cards. And one of them was using like twice the amount of, it was processing twice the amount of pixels as the other one. And they were both at 3 sessions. So that's a perfect example of why you'd want to be able to set it by pixels processed, or rather than sessions. Same exact cards. I mean, they're both 1080i's, and they were like both 3 sessions, but they're obviously running different, resolutions.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if Livepeer accepts 4K video for transcoding, that would just blow everyone up when it comes to their session.
Exactly. So it was just kind of a rough thought that came to me this morning, a few minutes before the call. I just happened to look up and see that, and I was like, look at that. There's a perfect example where we got 3 sessions, and one's using twice the amount of card on it. So that was just something to think about, and obviously I'd want to explore it a little bit more, but it looks like that would be a better way to set the maximum, again, not sessions, I guess maximum amount of work that you can handle.
Yeah, I guess that's the question. Like, maybe max sessions isn't the right parameter. Maybe max pixels is, but also maybe there is something that's more appropriate even than that. But it definitely feels like something to kind of investigate.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I am. I haven't like come up with anything like definitive, but it was just kind of like, this is an interesting thing, and it seems like there's a better way to do it where we can maximize our cards and really set limits where they're taking advantage of the hardware we have.
Definitely.
I mean, it's at some level, it's kind of like it's setting your limit for how much RAM you're willing to be, or how much of the cards. I mean, what is it of the cards?
Well, RAM isn't usually the issue. At least for none of the cards I have. I mean, I never get really close to using the maximum amount of RAM. For me, it's usually the decode on my cards that maxes out first. So that's why we would need to add a new metric on top of the pixels processed, because that's only measuring the pixels that are being encoded. So for me personally,
whatever the bottleneck is, it's like, what's the way of measuring that? Do we have any kind of idea collectively as a group?
Pixels per minute is what this new metric is.
That's a metric in the card. Okay.
No, it's a metric that Livepeer just opened up in their latest. You have to add actually, I think the million pixels per. No, I'm not even sure if it's per minute or per second. I have it set up as per minute, but that's been added where I think you can just, as long as you have monitor turned on, you can. If you go to the dashboard section, I put a little sample of just the query that you would use for that. But I would like to also see one of the incoming pixels as well, because again, these are kind of like your outgoing pixels, which for me isn't usually the bottleneck. It's usually for me, how many streams can I handle coming in? Or how many pixels can I come having in? I got to start learning how to say it that way. Where like, because if you've got a card that has two encoding chips, then you're going to be decode limited. If you have a card that has 2 decoding chips, 1 encoding chip, then you're going to be encode limited.
I have a question too about stream renditions. Is like, sometimes you get a stream rendition that is, the output is 1080p, 720p, 480p, 240p. Like, is it just transcoding 1080p into 1080p again? It seems like a mistake.
It could be. I mean, a lot of that just depends on how it was configured. I mean, I've seen sometimes where it's like a tiny file coming in, and it's like sending out just like huge amount of data compared to what's coming in. So I think a lot of that has to do with just how the broadcaster is configuring that stream. Sometimes they may not actually make sense for they're the best practice, but but it is stuff that I've definitely seen where it's like, I mean, like a tiny stream is coming in. It almost seems like, I mean, I'm guessing because I don't know what the input is, but it seems almost like a 480, and then they're upscaling it. Which, to be honest, on graphics cards like today's, it's probably you probably get pretty good quality doing that.
Definitely. Cool. I wanted to jump into. Did anyone have any other questions about stream renditions or max session limit setting or benchmarking or any of that stuff? Cool. We'll move on. I have a topic for myself, and it's just about IP addresses. I'm just running into an issue where I have a transcoder joined my pool, and he's using an IPv6 address, so it's a string of different numbers and letters. But when he connects to my transcoder, he's connecting, or as my orchestrator, but he's connecting as a IPv4. So, like, how do you convert those two things? Like, because when he sends me information that he's got his IP address, it comes in as 6. But then I can't calculate his earnings because it's showing up as 4 in my node.
They're not like convertible. They're both like independent things.
Okay. Right.
So he has an IPv4. He just needs to find it. It's there.
Oh, okay. So when he's sending me his IP address, because I ask for it separately in my own system, he's just giving me his 6 rather than his 4. So I need to specify my software to give me his 4.
I mean, if he's on Windows, just tell him to go to what's my IP or something like that, or on Google, that'll get it to him. If he's on like a VPS or something, he should be able to find it. If it's a VPS with a dedicated one, he should be able to find it there too. I just gotta, I think it's like IP-A or something like that, or I.
Right. Okay.
IPA, IP space A. Sorry.
Right. So they're not interchangeable. They're independent of each other.
Correct.
Well, there we go. That answers my question. Cool. Okay. Any other questions we'd like to cover that we haven't covered so far? There was one question which we didn't get to ask Yondon, and I don't believe anyone here is in chat that would be able to answer this, which is the stream selection process. I think we all... has anyone come across this? This is for Chase. Rebecca. Rebecca, are you with us right now?
Hi there. Yes, I am.
Do you wanna just ask your question and elaborate on your question about this stream selection process?
Yes, basically, as in the title, I'm just curious as to what is going to be most important for the selection process. Is it going to be mostly weighted on your stake balance or your distance from the server, or any other parameters? Because I know it was heavily weighted on stake before, and I'm curious if that will change, and how and what we're looking at, so I can sort of strive to get to those measures. Thank you.
Didn't Yondon say that basically there wasn't going to be a change in the selection process as of now? I mean, but there it did sound like that was permanent, but it just wasn't wasn't going to happen, like not right away, not just like switching over to L2, but or am I just imagining that I heard that?
Possibly. Sorry if I missed it. I was just, it was outlined last year what the selection process was, and I know it changed, and I wouldn't mind even a recap on what it is currently.
That's like the $1 million question that no one seems to be able to get a straight answer on. And I think there was also recently, there was a change made by mistake. There was a bug. So right now it seems to be a little strange that people with higher stake aren't getting as much work right now as the lower stake people. But that's
there's something here about like, there is the open source broadcaster software. If you take it out of the box, it has a kind of like an open source, a sort of a well auditable process for selecting. I don't happen to know off the top of my head what that is, but it's there in the code. And that's what any broadcaster using Livepeer public network would be starting with. That they can then choose to do what they want to adapt that. So for example, a broadcaster can choose to divert all of its transcoding work to a pre-specified nominated orchestrator. You can use the -orch adder address to just funnel all your transcoding work to a single orchestrator, or you can implement your own and experiment with new ways of diverting your work between different orchestrators, basing it on the price, basing it on a number of factors, basing it maybe even on like your historical relationship, like whether maybe one time I sent some work to this orchestrator and you know what, they weren't even awake. So I kind of put a little, not a black mark, but a gray mark against their name, against their IP address. And maybe I try them again in a week's time, and this time, oh yes, right, they're giving me work back, and oh, it's coming in. Okay, it's maybe not coming back quickly enough. So okay, maybe we need to think about the network capacity there. But then also maybe after some time, the broadcaster starts to test the different orchestrators and whether they're able to meet the advertised max sessions and other things. So there's quite a lot of factors involved in how like a broadcaster on the public network could adapt the software to implement their own strategy for selecting orchestrators from the network. But first of all, there is a kind of a default out of the box for any broadcaster running Livepeer broadcaster, but also you can set that to be your own orchestrator as well, or in fact just pre-nominate a predefined orchestrator, and as long as they're part of the active set, then they will receive your work. So there's lots of factors. There is also obviously the factor that livepeer.com have this gateway that is supplying I don't know how much percentage of all the work on the network, but I think it's a fair chunk. So there's also kind of the asking them the questions about how they do their weighting. So I don't think there's kind of one answer that fits all. It's a matter of all the different customers we have as orchestrators choosing themselves who to work with in this transcoding marketplace. And I've just talked a lot, so I'll stop now.
That is really helpful. Thank you. I totally agree with it's probably the broadcasters mainly setting their own standards, and then Livepeer's aside, sort of separate to that. So yeah, that does give me a broader base of what they're going to be looking for. Thank you.
No problem.
And I think there was a video made, I think Titan might have made it, or maybe it was a Livepeer quarterly call or something, but they'd outlined a good video tutorial of how the stream selection process works. Or I think it looks at performance first, and then it ends up picking by stake at some point. But that's floating around out there. I can try to find it and put a link in the chat.
Yeah, it's on my YouTube, but I mean, Rebecca was there with me when we watched that, and but
okay.
Yeah, but the problem with that is what Yondon had overviewed then doesn't seem to hold weight now, and it's not the same.
I'm just on a related issue here. Vires, any change in your in your amount of streams you've been receiving on the two nodes? Has it changed it all back to normal, or are you still getting that more on your smaller node?
No, I still get about 4 to 5 times more on my smaller node.
Okay, then I have no excuse I have no idea what's going on with me this morning, because my streams just dropped off crazy and they were like going great all weekend, but maybe it's just because it's Monday. All right, I was just curious to know if maybe they fixed something without letting us know again.
It's either slow Monday or we already hit the block. I don't know. Just kidding.
It's been slow for hours for me, so I don't think it's a block thing. But yeah, let's take a look. Let's see how long we have. We have an hour and 9 minutes. It looks like before the block. If my thing's up to date, let's see.
Mine are always slow on Mondays a little bit.
Hour and 1 minute. Yeah. I think it's probably that. But I was just I like to hear if I hear Vires says everything turned around, then I'm like, okay, then my life goes back to the sad life I used to have before the last week and a half or whatever it's been.
And hey, just coming back on this thing about like most of our business comes from livepeer.com, like they're not really in any obligation to tell us how they choose between us, really, are they? I mean, they're doing their thing. I don't know. What do people think?
Oh, I don't think they're obligated, but they have always shared. So I guess I don't know if it's expected, but it doesn't seem like they have a problem sharing that information, at least from my perspective.
I mean,
Granted.
It's beneficial for them because as we know what they want from the orchestrators, transcoders, we can optimize ourselves that way.
Yeah, right.
It should be baked into the open source implementation. So I assume livepeer.com just is a commercial layer to that open source broadcaster, which is the same thing that everybody's using. So it should be the same selection process, whether it's coming from livepeer.com or open source.
But in the open source, you have the ability to change that.
Right.
Sorry.
And I get the feeling they are experimenting with that and like learning how to make a better one, perhaps.
Oh,
like,
I see.
Maybe that's just my theory.
I think it was last week or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but I know recently in one of these water coolers it came up where that something had changed, and blanking on his name, Thul. I can't think of his real name, but from Livepeer, checked in with someone on the team, and there was a change made, but it wasn't done on purpose, from what we understand. So there was some sort of a they didn't mean to change anything from the word we're getting in the last, I don't know if it was a week and a half, 2 weeks. And my guess is they will figure out what happened and switch it back to the way they were doing it. But that's, again, just a guess. But whatever recently changed was not done intentionally from Livepeer's official word. So that's I think why there's just some issues coming up with it lately.
Very cool. Rebecca, did you have any more comments on the selection process or your question about how to increase broadcasters?
I mean, that's the elephant in the room. How are we going to increase broadcasters? Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're two big questions I know that are very hard to pinpoint a direct answer. The broadcaster one, I think Alexander was mentioning an improvement on how broadcasters can use or implement Livepeer, and I think that is a really good angle to get developers to know that Livepeer exists and how to get involved with that. So maybe that's a good work in progress. But otherwise, yeah, it's shone a bit of light on my questions. Thanks, Titan.
Yeah,
I'd like if I can just chip in there about how to get more broadcasters. I guess kind of question number one is, it's always been the case that livepeer.com are kind of pushing developers towards using the livepeer.com API, and that makes sense. It kind of dumbs things down a little bit, but also I'm not sure it's so complicated to run a broadcaster in like off-chain mode. It doesn't need any deposit, doesn't need any Rinkeby ETH, even doesn't need any mainnet ETH. You can just spin up a broadcaster, start streaming into it, and start streaming out of it. It's a pretty simple thing. You run Livepeer minus broadcaster, and it gives you effectively a live streaming server running on your computer. And I've just never really understood how that isn't something that someone who is building a video application, a live video application, how is that something that they wouldn't want? I mean, right now there is the issue that if they ever scale up and they actually start needing transcoding, because like when you first start building your app, you don't need there to be transcoding there. It's the kind of thing that you add in later when you start wanting to scale. But right at the very beginning, you have this broadcaster that is, a micro version of Twitch, and like it's something there that can just be built on top of. And you don't even need a CDN when you're at very kind of small early stages. You're streaming one thing out to a friend on the other side of the world. Maybe you can do that from your own VPS. So I guess I've just never understood whether there is much value in adding these layers around, these APIs around something that could be run freely, open source, just download and run it. It just doesn't. Has anyone got any? Can anyone help me?
Yeah, I mean,
I really enjoy
being
here with you guys. It's great.
Yeah, I tried to set up a broadcaster, as I mentioned earlier, about a year ago, and I didn't even realize the off-chain functionality until just a few months ago, after I'd already started coding against the Livepeer.com API. And now that we're going to layer 2, I'm probably going to redo it all and just do an open source broadcaster and use the actual mainnet, if you will. But that's certainly an option I think more people should probably consider. I mean, it doesn't help us get more work or anything, but it's a way
not
to
in the short term, but in the
right,
long
but
run,
in long
it's
term,
like the long
yeah.
tail.
Yeah, they're going to want to scale up and switch to our network eventually because their GPUs can't handle it all.
I mean,
So
let's not forget that it is coming through our network, so we should be kind of grateful for getting some business. And what the Livepeer.com gateway does feed us content, and that's good. But it is all about how to get a second broadcaster, and it's very exciting to hear you're going to set one up. I'd love to help.
I'd be glad to connect with you. And there's been, I think the big block for people was that deposit, on layer 1. So I never was able to even get through that. But I'm excited to try it out once we get there.
I mean, it's something where the deposit isn't going to become tiny. It's still going to be there. But it's still kind of, and from what I've heard on previous calls, there is kind of a bit of a few ideas being shared around, like how can we make it more accessible to new broadcasters, because right now the barrier to entry is relatively high, which kind of keeps it a bit of a one-horse show, and all the traffic starts getting sucked through a kind of a route to us, but one where it would be better for us if it'd be better for everybody if there was more than one broadcaster.
Yeah, I think also, something else to consider is that, a lot of people just aren't as technical and don't know how to get it to, how to get it working without a simple, easy to use interface. So, if someone was to put something together that was an easy way to use. Yeah.
I hear you, and I spent a lot of my time working in the Livepeer core on trying to do exactly that, like try and get a creative person, like someone who's an artist or a musician or something, try and get them to run a Livepeer broadcaster on their computer, and it's the hardest thing you could possibly imagine. I nearly died trying. I mean, I'm joking. I didn't nearly die trying.
But I think that's but I understand what you're saying, because
it's hard.
I think that's
a developer, it's like download this binary, run Livepeer-broadcaster. You don't even have to put off-chain. It automatically runs itself off-chain. And then you've got like the starting point. You stream RTMP in here. You stream HLS out here. It's a really nice kind of low-level live video primitive that if you can work out how to connect to it, and there's multiple RTMP libraries and multiple HLS libraries, it's like, why aren't we sending developers down this route of saying, run a broadcast yourself. Like, forget about the fact that right now deposits are too high to run, huge amounts of volume through mainnet. It's like these guys aren't thinking about huge amounts of volume on mainnet yet. They're just thinking about getting something up and running and prototyping and playing and building and making something cool. And even if it's only serving 10 viewers, it's like it's a starting point. So that's why I kind of just wonder whether a video developer really needs at a low level a CDN like distributing content through Amazon, and even transcoding. I'm sorry to do us out of business, but for when they start off, like they don't need transcoding. It's something that can come later, and as long as they're building on a Livepeer stack, then they can just kind of switch on transcoding and start sending us work. But until then, they just want to build something.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And as we move to L2, obviously the costs are going to go down. So I'm interested to see how that goes. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get one up and running. But it's a very good point. I actually saw somebody in the chat a few weeks ago say they were building a website to do video broadcasting, and they were going to set up an orchestrator at the same time to try to offset their costs. And I was thinking, I should have mentioned this to them, but I didn't have time. You could just run the whole thing off chain, so you would still have to set up, an orchestrator for your own site, but you could do that.
Right. Like there's some work that VideoDAC did around like just helping you use Livepeer Broadcaster from like the grassroots up. So instead of like thinking about it just like here, run it and connect it to this public network of transcoders and probabilistic micropayments, which is all just like so much complexity from day one. Like there's a completely opposite way to just say, here, you want to run video, live video? Yeah, here you go. Here's a really simple, easy building block to start with.
That should be, we should get that documented more. I mean, if it was like on the broadcaster tab of the Livepeer docs, if it was one of the paths that they could go down, that would be a great way.
The documentation in general for Livepeer is just tough to follow. I find it tough. I usually find like other people's.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're planning on revitalizing the docs, and I think Hunter is looking at this. But the thing we've got to remember as well is that the docs for Livepeer are kind of skewed towards getting developers to use livepeer.com API. So they're all going to be thinking about either use livepeer.com API or if you're big enough, then run your own infrastructure. But that kind of needs you to be big enough. Anyway, there is some documentation that's kind of like open source and not connected to livepeer.com or Inc. or anything, that's specifically around helping people to just get started using the Livepeer broadcaster. It's just not kind of in the docs.livepeer.org.
You're talking about the video doc.
Yeah, I'll share a link.
Yeah, no. I think that's I've used that before, and I found it's very easy to follow. I mean, it's the only way I could figure it out.
I mean, it's almost painfully easy. It's like you just run this command, and there you are. You've got a Livepeer broadcaster running on your computer, and like it'll work on Windows or on Mac or on Linux. And like here you are. Here's some broadcasting. Here's even how you can interact with this thing. Anyway, if you have any more feedback on it, I'd love feedback. We can make it better.
Is that you, Chris? The video doc? Is that you, or is that just
I'm part of VideoDAC, I would say.
Okay, because I thought it was you, but then the way you were just speaking about it, then I was like, wait, maybe it's not, and I just assumed that. Okay.
Well, there have been a few of us involved over the time. Different repositories. So we did some stuff around like integrating a Livepeer orchestrator with an Aragon DAO. So like an entirely on-chain integration, which was a bit esoteric at the time, but it was still kind of fun. And there were a couple of us involved in that. and various other projects. There's one thing, LPT order book. This was some Solidity to effectively give away to, like if you want to sell some LPT that are bonded, a way of selling them, of like doing the deal before you unbond, so that you have some security that your buyer is, has deposited some DAI, for example, and then you wait the unbonding period, and then you deposit the LPT into the contract, and that unlocks the DAI, and the deal gets done. So, yeah, Video Deck does loads of weird things.
All right. We're coming on 2 hours that we've been in this water cooler chat. What I would like to do is actually wrap it up. So, yeah, I'd like to thank everyone that's here, everyone that joined in on the conversation. Hopefully we got around to everyone's topics and questions. It was great to have Yond in here and a couple other the core team joining us. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining.
Hey, before we do, Titan, I've got to say a big thank you to you. Like, how you run these things is super cool. It's like, it's so open and warm-hearted, and everyone gets an opportunity to say something. Like, I don't often speak publicly on this kind of thing, but I feel so comfortable here with you, Titan, as the MC. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us, Chris, and everyone that comes, the regulars and the newcomers, and everyone watching online, because this one is going to be available public for viewing on YouTube. So thank you so much for coming, and we will all see you next week. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Make your config files, kids.
Yeah.
Get it already.